Hi, my name is Eva Landre Thomas, and this is Post-Traumatic Growth in Black Women After Perinatal Loss. This is the outline of my slides. Perinatal loss can be classified as miscarriage or fetal death, and it's common, but the psychological impact is immeasurable. Responses vary by age, race, culture, or religious belief for the people that suffer perinatal loss. And some common experiences are anxiety, stress, and depression. Perinatal loss can be early miscarriage in the first trimester. That's pregnancy up to 12 weeks. The second trimester, late miscarriages, that's 13 to 23 weeks. Also, stillborn, that's after 24 weeks of gestation. And it can also extend up to 28 days after the birth of the child. According to the CDC, the fetal mortality rate in Black women is more than twice per 1,000 babies than white and Hispanic women. Black women have perinatal loss at a rate of 11.2 per 1,000 babies, while white women have 5.0 and Hispanic 5.1. Let's talk about post-traumatic growth. This is the positive psychological change that takes place after experiencing a traumatizing event. The post-traumatic growth inventory measures 5 factors that measure post-traumatic growth. These are relating to others, new possibilities, personal strength, spiritual change, and understanding of life. And we will talk about each of these in depth later in these slides. During my research, I found 4 things that marked the post-traumatic growth in Black women. They were resilience, strength, cultural beliefs, and their deep-rooted spirituality. There were some challenges that I found that could hinder post-traumatic growth in Black women, and they are physical and mental health disparities. They have to deal with racial discrimination, sexism, and sex discrimination. They have a history of the strong Black woman ideology. Also, the superwoman complex. And then there's cultural mistrust for the medical profession. Now we will talk about issues related to perinatal loss in Black women. Black women have faced a number of issues where it comes to perinatal loss. Physical and mental health care disparities is one such issue. Social and structural factors such as limited neighborhood health care access, unbalanced access to education and employment opportunities. So if you don't have an education, you can't get a job. Without a proper job, you can't get health insurance. Redlining, which is a discriminatory practice that was conducted by banks back in the 50s that prevented Black people from getting housing in particular areas. So it was illegal practice of refusing to offer credit or insurance in particular communities on a discriminatory basis. Distrust of providers, racially divided healthcare system, the negative views of healthcare, and the negative views of mental health care. Another issue that Black women face is racial discrimination. Racial discrimination causes a lot of things to happen that contribute to perinatal loss, such as chronic stress. Stress leads to other healthcare challenges such as weakened immune system, elevated blood pressure, and memory problems. And these challenges can harm your baby. Increased adverse birth outcomes, such as preterm labor, low birth weight, stillborn, and miscarriages. Racial bias from providers, not giving people of color the same care as white women, being ignored during pediatric visits, making critical lapse in judgments, neglectful, dismissive, or disrespectful treatment, and downright medical abuse. Withholding care, ignoring the cries of black women and not giving them the care and the attention they need when they're having when they're in distress. Lack of empathy for black indigenous people of color. Dismissal of pain, not coming to the aid of the mother because of the historical notions that black women can tolerate more pain. And lack of bodily autonomy. They don't allow them to make decisions for their own body. They're not being heard. Another issue that black women had to face was sexism, also known as gendered racism. They were perceived more masculine than white women. Therefore, they were treated with less kindness and less care than other women. The black female was invisible. They were deemed invisible where it related to their pain, physical and emotional pain, and systematic oppression that caused black women to be stifled in society. They were portrayed as hypersexual, and this caused black women to be targeted and viewed as different, not as feminine, pure, or innocent as other women. They were treated differently because of assumptions such as that they were on government assistance and called welfare queens. They were seen before they were even known as single parents. We will now talk about the emotions that black women face after perinatal loss. The emotions that black women and all women face after perinatal loss be grief, anger, guilt, shame, anxiety, and depression. But black women have a higher chance of major depression setting in after 30 days compared to white and Hispanic women. The parental grief has been described as extreme, regardless of the length of time since the loss, the age of the child at death, or the cause of death. The loss due to stillbirth, miscarriage, or neonatal death may have been a debilitating impact on a mother and are associated with post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, and sleeping disorders. Jones et al. Conducted a study of black women's emotions after perinatal loss with a group of black women. And what they found were feelings of shattered dreams. They felt like they were having loss on top of loss, unexplainable, etched images, broken bonds, connectedness, emotional attachments, adding insult to injury. Over and over again, black women were having to deal with loss. This was an emotion that they dealt with. Also questioning God. They wanted to know why them? Why? Why their baby? And they had guilt concerning it. They also dealt with dissociation. With that, they felt disbelief, it's unreal, their inability to process, disconnection, emotional blocking, emptiness, and even dazed states at times. They had paralyzing fear, fear of getting pregnant again, fear um, of realizations of problems, and they felt powerless. They also felt left in the dark, like they just didn't understand what happened and why it happened to them. And then they had a uniqueness of grieving. It was individualized from one woman to the other, had different things that they dealt with, like hurry up and move on with their grief. Um, they were really sad. The depression was overwhelming. They cried a lot, inability to sleep. They had attachments to the baby's clothing. They didn't want to let the baby's clothing go, or the linens. Anything that made them feel attached to the baby, they didn't want to let it go. They had memories that they couldn't let go, and their self-preservation was in question. And they felt like they needed to try and preserve others, hold on to them because they were afraid of loss. We will now talk about barriers to post traumatic growth after perinatal loss for Black women. One such barrier was mental health obstacles. Black women have a higher rate of depression. They're more likely to experience higher rate of perinatal depression when compared to other racial groups in the United States. They have higher adverse child experiences, otherwise known as ACE. They dealt with childhood trauma and things that caused them to have mental health issues. There were less than 30% Black Americans that will seek mental health issues, though they have twice the mental health challenges because of mistrust. Many women are uninsured or underinsured, so they're not able to seek mental health care. Distrust for medical institutions. Because of historical systematic issues, Black women did not trust mental health institutions. Another barrier to post traumatic growth is strong Black woman ideology. This ideology is the expectation of Black women to be resilient, strong, self reliant, providers, caretakers, and emotionally invulnerable despite the adversity they are facing in their lives. It does have some positive connotations as well as the negative. This ideology will cause the Black woman to push through pain and trauma. It causes the Black woman to undermine support. So they don't get support because they push it away. Also, suppress emotions. This ideology, you don't express your emotions. You're strong. Sacrifice their own needs for others. They don't acknowledge their pain, so they don't grieve. And so they continue to take care of others when they need to be taking care of themselves. They're obligated to manifest strength when they're weak. And then they lack self care. The origin of this ideology is rooted in slavery, racism, and gender oppression. It was born in negative stereotypes like Mammy and Jezebel. Mammy took care of everybody. She was always available for them, but she never took care of herself. And Jezebel was promiscuous, strong, took over everything. And these were the notions that they placed on black women. And this notion or ideology is encouraged by media, the family, and institutions. The impact of this ideology as a barrier to post traumatic growth is that it can hinder black women from seeking help. It can also stop the black woman from expressing emotions because they have to be strong, they have to suppress their emotions. It can delay healing and the grief process because in order to heal, you have to be able to express the emotion, and can positively impact resilience and spiritual growth. So it's not all bad, but when it comes to receiving care, mental health care, physical health care, then the strong black woman hinders the progress of the post traumatic growth in black women. Another barrier to post traumatic growth after perinatal loss for black women is the superwoman schema. This is connected to the strong black woman ideology, but it's a psychological structure to describe how many black women feel obligated to appear strong and vulnerable, suppress emotions, and be successful despite systemic roadblocks. This causes them to be overworked and taking care of everyone else and neglecting themselves. Traits of the superwoman schema is they're able to manage multiple tasks with little to no assistance. Others see them as positive, but the black woman is struggling on the inside. They resist being vulnerable or dependent on anybody. They have to always be independent. They feel an obligation to help everyone else, though they are overwhelmed themselves. But it helps them to be successful in education and careers. But it's short term success because the health data reports that pregnancy deaths related to the superwoman schema in black women are 5.2% higher than white women. The impact of the superwoman schema is they have grief suppression. They avoid expressing grief, which hinders emotional processing and healing. They resist seeking help. They feel like they can handle it alone and therefore won't engage with support services or therapy. They get burned out. They're doing too much and they're taking care of everyone else and suppressing their emotions. And so that can lead to mental and emotional and physical exhaustion, complicating their recovery. And this schema is harmful to interpersonal relationships. They need to do it themselves. They shut out loved ones. Because post traumatic growth requires vulnerability to be able to process and share the pain, the superwoman schema and the strong black woman discourages vulnerability, and it's a barrier to post traumatic growth. Another barrier to post traumatic growth after perinatal loss is cultural mistrust. Black women have historically distrusted healthcare and mental health care systems, which can affect post traumatic growth. The mistrust is rooted in race based medical malpractice histories. For example, Tuskegee syphilis study. They withheld treatment for syphilis for approximately 400 black men. And then there's the black women and eugenics law, where lawmakers sought to sterilize black women because they felt they were having babies too fast. And then the Henrietta Lack study, which was where they took cervical cells from her and harvested them without her knowledge. 51% of Black people surveyed believed that U.S. healthcare was designed to hold Blacks back. And then 55% reported negative experiences with doctors. Black women experience twice the mental health conditions, but they get half of the mental health care because of mistrust. The effects of cultural mistrust is that they don't seek grief counseling because they don't trust the healthcare system or the mental health care system. Also, they withhold their emotions, so they won't share with the provider who don't share their background or their values. And so that can prevent them from being prevent emotional processing and hinder post-traumatic growth. Well, because of the history, they won't participate in support groups or research. Therefore, it prevents cultural available data from being gathered in order to promote post-traumatic growth. And it'll reinforce the superwoman or the strong Black woman ideology. It'll reinforce do it yourself, be independent, don't ask for help. You're strong. So now we'll talk about the factors that promote post-traumatic growth after perinatal loss for Black women. The first thing we'll talk about that promotes post-traumatic growth in Black women after perinatal loss is relating to others. In the post-traumatic growth inventory, relating to others is healing through sisterhood. And healing through sisterhood, you get support groups that build friendships, increase cultural values and beliefs, build communities, promote relationship building, and naturally develop in communities and organizations. They promote mental and physical health goals and offer intervention training. So, after you get healed, you can heal your sister. Healing through sisterhood organizations. One organization is called Birthing Beautiful Babies, Sisters Offering Support. This organization addresses pregnancy and related concerns to reduce anxiety, stress, and panic attacks during pregnancy. Black perinatal doulas for in-person training. And they have clinical psychologists that facilitate the training. They have cognitive-based training, cognitive behavioral training activities, and it targets the population. And they have focus groups. Another organization through sisterhood is Primetime Sister Circle, PTSC. It's a cognitive behavioral model combined with values and beliefs that target midlife Black women to increase physical activity and reduce stress. Also, you have Sisters Offering Support, that's SOS, early intervention for professional Black women with anxiety, uses cognitive-based training or cognitive-based techniques with cultural aspects to educate about anxiety, cognitive restructuring, and progressive muscle relaxation. Themes of sisterhood is supportive environment, openness, they can communicate with each other, building a sisterhood so they have support, sharing experiences with others, so they won't feel alone. No one feels alone in the group. And learning valuable skills. So they team build and they skill build with each other. Talk about new possibilities and promoting post traumatic growth in Black women after perinatal loss. You have the new opportunity of creating purpose from painful experiences. They can start a support group geared towards Black women and become Black doulas. They can redefine themselves beyond the grief of loss. Cultural affirming creative expressions. They can start to write. They can express themselves in the art, storytelling, and cultural rituals. Also, pursuing education and healing professions. So, once they receive the care that they need in order to have post traumatic growth, they can pursue education and healing professions to be able to help others that will enable them to receive the same healing that they have received. Another way to promote post traumatic growth is personal strength. Personal strength in Black women is rediscovering themselves, embracing the pain, and allowing support. Because in the strong Black woman, they don't embrace the pain, they deny the pain. But the personal strength will allow them to do that in post traumatic growth. Spiritual beliefs and resilience, becoming vulnerable, set boundaries, and prioritize themselves and their self care. Then there's spiritual change that promotes post traumatic growth in Black women. It deepens spiritual connection after loss, new spiritual understanding. You gain new insight through questioning and research of suffering, healing, and life. Greater trust in God's timing. And then there's renewed or new engagement in cultural spiritual practices and becoming a spiritual mentor or counselor for others. And lastly, on the post traumatic growth inventory, you have understanding for life, a new perspective on the preciousness and the value of life. They start to love those who are around them and embracing intentionality with living, letting go of things that do not promote good living, that's not meaningful, such as careers that aren't meaningful, relationships, and goals. And they try to promote personal post traumatic growth. They find peace in uncertainty. They trust themselves to endure and adapt. And they think about their legacy. What does the Black woman want to leave behind? It's not the grief, it's not the pain, but it's the healing and the strength. Let's talk about community where it pertains to promoting post traumatic growth. The community creates a culturally safe space. It's not judgmental, and they have Black led support groups. Cultural community healing, like traditions represented, the spirituality of the community is represented, and the rituals for grief and remembrance, such as burials and things that are rituals for the Black community. The community is also represented with peer support, the sister circles, where they come together and they support their sister. If they don't hear from them, they're calling them and they're taking them out when they're overwhelmed, and they're encouraging them. And then you have the support groups that where they can talk about what's going on in their lives, and then they can be encouraged in that way, and they can feel the body of the support group. And then you have um, the cookouts. And when we say cookout, or when black people have a cookout, that means that the community brings everyone together, and they have games, and they have laughter, and they have body life, they have encouragement, and they know that they're supported. Also, you have the advocacy and empowerment, systemic change, getting into the community and making changes to the laws. And then awareness seminars. The community is having awareness seminars that tells about health and um, the statistics where it comes to black women and the family. And then they give resources. They're letting them know where they can get jobs and mental health care, and they connect, and make they make connections, and they network. Also promoting post-traumatic growth in black women is a spiritual community. Spiritual support in the black community is paramount. Black people are very religious people, very spiritual people. So the support of the spiritual community will help to promote post-traumatic growth. The support of the church, they look to that, and the church and the community partnership, collaborating with mental health professionals, and trauma-informed care training for spiritual leaders, that they will be trauma aware, have resilient workshops, um, trauma informed care principles. They need to understand those when they're trying to take care of women that, or anybody in the body, in the church body, that has had trauma. And for the community, the spiritual community, to be present for the family so that they don't feel alone in their time of grief and in their time of sadness. Also, the spiritual community would need to give space to grieve and to keep traditional rituals. Allow the parent to grieve without feeling unspiritual, and be able to release emotions and keep traditional rituals such as burials. That's instrumental in post-traumatic growth, as well as addressing mental health stigmas in the Black church. Um, because trust is given to the pastors in Black churches, they need to address the mental health stigmas. They need to address the things that affect the Black community, and getting help for those things outside of the church, or even bringing mental health professionals inside the church. Further research needed to be conducted on the effects of insurance being integrated into the mental health care, and how affordable mental health care will affect the post-traumatic growth for Black women. We recommend integrating mental health care support into existing health care coverage to address existing inequities, and to offer access to culturally equal therapy regardless of insurance coverage or socioeconomic status. Would the numbers look differently if Black women could afford mental health care and they got the same health care that those with a higher economic status got? And would it look differently if it was made accessible in their current insurance? Let's sum it all up. In conclusion, despite the disproportionate numbers of prenatal loss due to physical and mental disparities, racism, and sexism, many Black women still experience post traumatic growth. The growth is deeply rooted in resilience, cultural belief systems, spiritual strength, and the historical burdens of the strong Black woman ideology and superwoman schema. Though this can be empowering, it can also hinder vulnerability and healing. Black women are not just surviving loss, they're transforming loss for the next generation. Their growth is evident in their emotional depth, their strong community bonds, their deep spiritual connection, how they redefine their priorities, and they're being advocates and change agents. The factors that are used to measure the post traumatic growth are expressed through African American values, community healing, spiritual traditions, and building legacy. Understanding how Black women grieve, heal, and grow is important for care professionals, communities, and systems of care. Promoting personal post-traumatic growth means honoring cultural identities, dismantling harmful societal narratives, and supporting spaces that affirm vulnerability as strengths. Ultimately, post-traumatic growth in Black women after perinatal growth is not just about recovery. It's about reclaiming the power, rewriting their legacy, and leading a path forward for the next generation.